Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am so excited. So I'd love for the audience to know more about your background and what really brought you into the world that you're in now professionally.
Yeah. So my name's Sophie Schiliro. I am 21 years old and I am a chef. I started cooking when I was 15 is when I started my apprenticeship. In Australia, that is a 3-year apprenticeship. And I was able to start at 15 because I did school part-time and my training part-time. But then instead of going to college, I left school. So I left school when I was 16 and then went just full-time work, smashed out my apprenticeship. And yeah, so I was able to be qualified by the time I was 17, nearly 18. I've worked in a lot of restaurants. I'm from Canberra, Australia. So I've worked in a lot of restaurants in Canberra, but I also have traveled to Spain, to England. I was in Singapore briefly where I met you.
Yes.
And where I was fortunate enough to be able to work with some of the world's best chefs. And yeah, that's the overview.
I love that. Well, you mentioned being in Spain and in Singapore, and I'd love to know more about when and how you really felt like you were making strides working in these different countries and cultures. When did it really hit you? How did it feel different? What did it feel like? And I'd love to know just more about that.
Yeah, well, I remember when I got my my internship in Europe, I was so over the moon because it was such a rash, not planned out decision in any way, shape, or form. Like when I started cooking, I always knew, like, I want to go to Europe and I want to, work for like all those amazing chefs. Like it was always a thing, but I had never actually taken the time to like plan it out to do it. So one day, I was at the job I was at currently that I left to go to Europe. I was just like not having a particularly good time mentally. And, I had bounced around from a lot of jobs because, I either didn't get along with people or it wasn't the work I wanted to do. And I think at that age as well, like I was 18 and I was very like, oh my God, like what work do I even want to do? Like what's life? What's decisions? What's everything? So I was just very confused.
Mm-hmm.
And my bright brain thought, well, no time like the present to ship yourself off to Europe. So I just bought a ticket, like a round ticket, so like from Europe and back.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a deal that I didn't actually have to give them a location. Like I could give them a location whenever I wanted.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, sick, because I don't have one. So I think it was 4 weeks until I was about to leave for Europe and I hadn't gotten a job. I hadn't gotten a location. So I was like freaking out a bit. And I had applied to all the 100 best restaurants in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent them all an email. And I think about 30 of them just like didn't respond to me at all. I was like, fair enough. No experience. That's fair. The rest of them said no. And I was like, that's great, fair enough. But there was one restaurant on the 100 best list, number 14. And this literally happened a week and a half before I was supposed to leave to Europe.
Wow.
I was literally up until like 3 a.m. because I was stressed. I was like, I'm going to Europe. I have no plan. I'm freaking out. And I got an email at 3 a.m. My time saying, we'd like to accept you into Azurmendi. Congratulations, rah, 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 rah. And I was like, holy shit, so I guess I'm going to Spain.
Wow. Wow. So I have full goosebumps all over my body. I'd love to know a little bit more about the emails you sent and the
Yeah.
way in which you presented yourself or communicated your story. Again, as a 18-year-old, had this foresight to even Google the list, to search up the list, to know about the 100 best restaurants. And I'd love to learn more about just how you pitched yourself.
I find I do the same thing every single time. Anytime I'm trying to pitch myself to somebody, to like, especially when it's somebody that, you don't know, you're in a different country, like, and it's kind of a job that you aren't actually qualified for. I pitch myself as just like the most enthusiastic person you will ever meet in your entire existence. Like, I sent them a portfolio of like photos of food I had made with like descriptions and rah. And I made sure that my resume had absolutely everything in the world I had done on it. So I did a lot of volunteer work. So I made sure that was on there. I feel like nothing can hurt. I did, a lot of cooking competitions, and, I threw them on. I was just like absolutely everything. I got as many references as I could. And I feel like that's just one part, but then the cover letter that you send to people is also so important, because I literally just wrote like a chapter on like, this is how I know who you are. This is why I love the 100 best. This is where I see myself in 5 years. I'm the hardest working person in the entire world. Please just like give me a chance. You won't regret it. Like, pretty much begging. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't. I feel like that's how like I've been fortunate enough to get these opportunities, because I literally beg for them. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's really important to do,
Yeah.
especially when you're young and you don't have all the experience in the world to have behind you.
Mhm. I love that. And I think what really came through in what you just shared is just the sincerity that underscores the enthusiasm. I think that enthusiasm has to come from this really sincere and confident place where you can stand behind the fact that even though you don't know a lot of the things that you'll learn from this experience, you are ready and you have that potential. And it is fully up to each person and how they choose to write their own story in communicating that potential, because no one
Exactly.
else can really do that for
Yeah.
you. That is fully up to the person writing the cover letter. And then the other thing that really stuck out to me that I hope the audience picks up on is that portfolio. And personally, in my industry, I have heard that portfolios or websites aren't as common for the folks in my niche or area, but that didn't really stop me from making one, because I had to have control in how I told my story, and I would be the only one who would have that control, because literally no one else could pitch myself like I could pitch myself. And so if this
Exactly.
option to make the portfolio, to share your pictures, if that exists, I think the way my brain worked and works is like saying, why not? And so I absolutely love the fact that you shared that, because there is that effort and sincerity that connects the gap between you sending 100 emails and getting that one yes from this very rare opportunity. And when people say, I think, oh, this doesn't happen for everyone, I think it's because they're missing those ingredients. They're missing how to bridge that gap with the effort and that sincerity. What do you think?
I could not agree more. I've had so many people say to me, like, oh my God, you must have worked so hard for that. Like, that's just so amazing that like that happened for you. Like, really like putting me on a pedestal of like, I've just done the best thing in the world. And, you know, I was proud of it, like, sure. But I literally like there are no rules. Like if somebody does not, if I want something, I will send 3,000 emails until somebody tells me that I'm stalking them and to leave them alone. Like there are no rules. Like send a portfolio, send a cover letter, send 5,000 references. Like I think that age doesn't matter, because a lot of people say to me like, oh, you've done so much at a young age. I was like, well, even if I was 50, it doesn't matter. Like nothing actually matters. I think the things that stop people from doing things like that are these made up rules that they have in their head that, you know, society or, you know, whatever has brought into them that they aren't willing to break. When you should just be putting yourself out there and just, if you want something, just like go and get it kind of thing.
Absolutely. And knowing that the worst thing that could happen was the no, and you got several no's, but you just had to wait for that
Yes.
one yes. And I think so much about my story and how in my industry there are these certain rules that I thought were undisputable. So things such as your grade point average, the school you went to, what sort of research experiences you had. And what's so interesting is I think if you allow yourself to rethink those rules to say, how can I color out of the lines a little bit or a lot? I think it allows us to think more clearly. And what I'm curious to learn more about is whether you had any practices, things that you used to cope or to persevere during those 4 weeks that you mentioned when the clock was ticking and you had to figure out where you were going, what you were going to do, especially with those bigger questions of I'm young, what is life that you mentioned. What did you use in the back end to sort of persevere through that time and those critical days before that yes came when you didn't know whether it was coming or not?
I think a lot of it was just being in the unknown and being 100% okay with that. Like I just thought at the end of the day, I've bought a ticket to Europe. So like that's done. If I don't get a job, then I'm just going to have to fly somewhere. I was actually thinking Paris because I was like, that would be fun. And I'm just going to have to go into restaurants personally and ask for a job. And whether that's as a kitchen hand or, you know, I'll cut vegetables, I'll cut carrots all day. I was just very prepared to just not get a job, pick a spot, and then do whatever it took to get a job in that spot. And if that didn't work out, then you just go on a holiday. And I'm just in Europe and I'll stay at a nice hotel for a bit and I'll have a holiday. Like, I think being comfortable in everything completely failing
Yes.
is something that is really important in order to take the necessary steps to succeed in a career or in a situation or in anything, really.
Right. Absolutely. And to not let that fear paralyze you, but to
Exactly.
move through that with the confidence that you not only have the backup plan, but also the backup plan to the backup plan. And if truly everything goes to shit, you're still okay with it because, you know, probably if we're listening to this or creating this, then we have a few privileges like electricity, a phone, and that we will be okay and that we'll figure out how to regroup.
Well, that's exactly it. You can't ignore the privilege you have. Like,
Yes.
if everything, you know, at the end of the day, I think I could have just like thrown in the towel and sold the ticket. I would have lost a lot of money, but at the end of the day, like that wouldn't have mattered. If I wanted to throw in the towel and get rid of the ticket and lose the money, that's okay in the situation I was in.
Right.
And you also have the people around you. Like, if something really, really bad happened, I had my mum, I had my sister, I had my friends. So I think it's also a reminder that, you do need to recognize the privilege around you when making really intense and rash decisions, because a lot of people I do see can't make those rash decisions because, their life will probably, like, something bad will happen if it doesn't work out. And and a lot of people don't have the safety net around them to go and make really crazy decisions and to just leave the country and, feel comfortable in failure. A lot of people don't have that. So I'm really lucky that I was able to do that.
Right.
But at the same time, recognize that a lot of people can't.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see this story or this message with an asterisk of get introspective about your privilege. So if you are privileged in the spectrum, recognize what is paralyzing you versus what really is a concern that is valid, where there isn't a safety net. And I think this discussion surrounding that is so crucial because for some listeners, there truly may not be a safety net. And so leaning into the unknown, making the backup plans has to, again, be very realistic. And I think everyone can take a part of this story for it to apply to them. So I'm so grateful that you shared that. I'd love to jump into your experience then in Spain and the nature of the communication in the kitchens and what you saw through that experience. And I'd love to chat about the differences and similarities between your experiences in Australia, in Spain, England, and then Singapore. And we can do this however way you want, but I'd love to talk about, how folks spoke to each other.
It's really interesting because, like, I'm going to tell this story, and that first part of the story where, like, taking yourself out of the comfort zone and, getting something that you've always wanted until you have it and doing whatever it takes to get it is one thing that I learned and that I'll always have with me and I will carry with me. But I can't say that everything else I learned after that was as positive. But, in saying that, like, I'm 100% grateful for all the experiences I've had, and I would not change it for the world, because even if, I learned negative things, I still learned things that I don't like. And in Spain was really, really interesting. So when I got that position, I was very naive. I was like, well, I'm going to Spain, and, like, I didn't speak any Spanish at all. So I was like, oh, well, better start learning some Spanish, but, like, I'm literally going to be there in, like, a week and a half. So I don't think I could learn a lot of Spanish in a week and a half. But I figured, I was like, well, if they're taking people from Australia, like, surely they speak English in the kitchen. Otherwise, like, because they didn't even ask me if I spoke Spanish. Like,
Right.
Surely that would just be a thing.
Right.
And then I got to Spain and I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, it was one thing, like, planning it, but now I'm here and I'm freaking out. And I got a taxi to the restaurant, which was a little bit outside of Bilbao. So it was about a 35-minute taxi drive from Bilbao, the main city. And it was this gorgeous, like, picturesque. Like, it was insane. It was a work of art, this restaurant. It was made of glass, and it was so big, and it was built around like trees. So there were trees in the restaurant, and all of this like nature that it was built around, and then like more was grown inside. Like, it was like having a fine dining meal in a forest.
Wow.
And I kind of just got there, and I like walked in, and I was like, I've made it. Like, this is it. Like, I'm done. I'm like, this is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. This is incredible. Like, I'm done. And then they took me to where, because they were supplying my accommodation. So they took me to like the basement of the restaurant, where there were 3 rooms with bunk beds and like 2 shared bathrooms, because I think there were like 25 of us that got accepted, and all over the world. So like, there was literally someone from Korea, America, you know, me from Australia, England, people from everywhere, all over the world. And which was actually really interesting, because no 2 people were from the same place.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, which made it very fun.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, oh my God, I'm literally sleeping in the same room as 8 different strangers that I don't know, that I've never met. Guys and girls, we're sharing a bathroom. I'm terrified. What if we hate each other? This is like really scary. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
So I called my mum crying, and I was like, Mum, I think I made a mistake. I was like, Mum, I don't know what to do. Like, well,
Oh my gosh.
She was like, you're there. Just give it a go. Nobody said you have to stay there, but you have to try. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I give it a go, and it was definitely difficult to like start. The start was really hard, like getting settled, but like then I made friends, and you know, we went to bars, and it was just like fun. And then it just turned into like a sleepover with your friends in one big room. But then at 8 a.m. sharp, the chefs would like come and wake you up, and you had to be outside. Like, your uniform had to be pristine. So like, chef's jacket, apron, chef's hat, hair slicked back. The girls had to wear just like minimal amounts of makeup, like just so they had a presentable face, like not tired, because the customers would come into the kitchen. And we would go upstairs and like start the day with a ton of prep. And I had this one chef who was in charge of training me, and she decided that she didn't want to talk to me in English. So I was kind of like, okay, like that's fine. Because again, I was also like, I don't want to be that brat that's like comes to another country and expects them to speak my language.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, I'm in Spain. If you feel the need to speak Spanish to me, well, I don't want to be rude about that.
Mm-hmm.
So she was talking to me in Spanish the whole time, and I did not understand a single word she said. So I kind of looked at her with like a real blank face, and she'd like do the actions for me, and then I'd be like, oh, okay. So then after about like 3 or 4 weeks, everything she said in Spanish, I could understand.
Wow.
Because I could just understand those phrases.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just kind of the whole vibe of the kitchen that really didn't sit well with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, it was a really hostile place.
Mm.
It was a very competitive place.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even though like I did make friends, of course, and like I still have those friends, like I love them. And like that was a really great experience. But, you know, you weren't allowed to speak in the kitchen. So it was dead silent all the time. You pretty much weren't allowed to do anything. You just had to get given your job, do your job, which was the same every day. And that was it. And communication wise was really interesting because there was a clear, everybody who was Spanish. So all the chefs that worked there were 5 chefs that were full-time and constant there. They all spoke Spanish, and they were just like above everybody else who you had to listen to. And I was like, yeah, like fair enough. But it was just very clear that like, and don't forget, like we're working for free.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was not mentioned. Okay, that adds a lot of context.
So in Spain, I was working for free. They gave me accommodation and food, so not really free,
Right.
but I wasn't getting paid.
I
So
see.
you were really being worked to the bone, and you were being worked to get everything out of you possible. And, you know, we weren't there for the money though. The money isn't what got me. It was the experience, and it was amazing. But, you know, no speaking in the kitchen. It was hostile. It was rude at times. You know, there was bullying at times. There was, you know, just so much that happened that made me question, why would I want to work? I understand that, you know, it's got 3 Michelin stars, 14th best restaurant in the world, whatever, but why would I want to work at a restaurant that's so high up, but literally makes me feel like crap?
Yeah.
And makes me kind of not want to be a chef, makes me feel lazy, makes me feel not good. So I was like, it really made me think, do I really want to aim for the top 100 restaurants in the world? Or do I want to aim to enjoy my work?
Yeah. Do you think that you questioned whether those two were mutually exclusive, where you would have to have one or the other, or were the wheels spinning in your head on trying to see if there were other places, just different work environments? Like, what was your thought process like then?
I definitely held out hope. I was like, you know, maybe there are other places that are different, you know, which is when I actually went to a restaurant in England, because I was like, you know, like, let's just give it a go. And I went there, and it was just kind of the same thing. It was just, I feel like it's the corporate world of cooking. Like, it's just so planned, and it's not fun, and there's no laughter, and there's no personality, and there's no, you know, which is interesting because the food that these restaurants cook is so different and so out there.
And it's to facilitate laughter and bonding and these beautiful sensory experiences. Yeah.
And it's also though, like, I think, and I always think it, like, the customers in a restaurant are like just my, like, one of my favorite things. Like, I love talking to customers, and I love, you know, being able to joke and being able to have them enjoy their night, because I think every person that goes to a restaurant, they don't want the chef to like walk around them and act like, you know, oh, I can't look at you, I can't talk at you, I have to do my job, I can't smile, I have to, like, you know, be completely professional. When I've had some of the best experiences joking with customers, asking them about their day, and like getting to know them. And it also makes the cooking for them so much more personal. And I think that is what I love. So that's why, you know, going to Spain, going to England, and even the same thing happened in Singapore, where I was just like, this is not personal. This is a show.
This is a show, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a show that we're putting on, which the customers are enjoying. And, you know, the chefs, some of them do enjoy. But even the chefs I worked with in Spain, in England, in Singapore, like, so many. And this was another thing. I wasn't the only person that was a little bit unhappy. Everybody was. Everybody thought the same thing. And I was just like, I don't understand how I've only been here for 3 months, but how everybody has been doing this for like 2 years and is able to come to work every day with the same complaints and, hate it. Like people would say to me, like, I hate my job.
Wow. But to keep spinning on that wheel and to not be able to get off the wheel because of the prestige that it brings. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like me. I was like, it's so prestigious. It's so like, it's as high as you can go. Like, being head chef at one of the best restaurants in the world or owning one of the best restaurants in the world. But now, after my experiences, I just genuinely, like, when I picture my future restaurant and my career, I picture something small. Maybe we get awards, maybe we don't. But I know the customers that walk in every day. I have meaningful conversations with customers. My staff respect their workplace and they enjoy going there every day because chefs are at work like 90% of the time. Like we work ridiculous hours, so you can't hate it. And a space where they feel confident and comfortable enough to share ideas and, listen to each other and make friends and laugh and joke and, be 100% themselves without judgment.
Right. So in this quest for shifting this culture and creating this new way, have you seen examples of this being done in places? Do you have any models through the spaces that you've been in, through the spaces that you've heard of, through the people you've met, interacted with? Are there people that have upheld these values of laughter and community, or do you feel like you truly have to, again, lean into the unknown in crafting it? And I ask this again to understand why these spaces have been constructed in this way, how it benefits them, and how this new way can be championed and celebrated on these TV shows and, cooking conversations.
Yeah. I think, and I'm really about to call it out here. The Michelin Star is about to get called out. I think for starters, it's just all a lie. It's just like when chefs are being interviewed, and I don't think it's just chefs. I think this can go for a lot of people, but be honest. Like, chefs are sitting there and talking about how, I believe in equality, for example. I believe in equality and, paying my staff well and treating my workplace well and, all this stuff. But then actually go there and talk to the employees and you will hear a completely different story. Because that person may believe in that, and that's great. But they have 3 other people under them implementing things that don't work. It's a whole chain.
Right.
And it's like, so the person at the top might believe it, but the 3 people under her or him don't implement it themselves.
Right.
And I think that people just need to be a bit more honest about it. Like Gordon Ramsay, for example, the way he's made his money, and to start, he's a great chef. He's one of the greatest chefs in the entire world. His skills, everything, impeccable. But the way he's made money off making a show about screaming at people in kitchens and treating them like shit and swearing at them and, making them feel crap for making a mistake or not knowing something is what happens in real life.
Right.
And he's making money off it.
Right. And the fact that money can be made off of it and that you can be this celebrated person gives other people in all of these other spaces the ability and the ticket to be able to do that themselves. And there are people who watch the shows and they feel like they're allowed to then treat their employees, no matter what industry they're in, like that as well. It's this sort of behavior that is celebrated, even though it's unkind.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think that it's too celebrated. Because even like, the greats, Marco Pierre White came out on social media and said a really, really sexist thing. He said, it was a very long time ago, but he said, I don't like to hire female chefs because they don't have the same strength as male chefs. And I think, sexism in an industry is also a bit looked over because of people like him that say things like that. And if everybody just goes, oh, well, it's Marco Pierre White, he's one of the best chefs in the world, it's too celebrated.
Right.
And nobody actually just goes, actually, no, that's ridiculous. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Especially nobody that, is at the same level as him. Nobody calls, you got to call each other out. You've got to be 100% open and honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one example I did get of that was Dominique Crenn. I was at the 50 Best Talks in 2000. Oh my God, I don't even remember. It was so long ago. 2018? Nope, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a man, she was the only female chef on stage, and a man literally got up and said, how do you navigate having children around your crew? And I was like, she was getting all the kid questions, all the, how do you think you're going to be a good mom if you're working so many hours? And no, the male chefs weren't getting anywhere near that.
Mm-hmm.
And Dominique Crenn stood up and said, stood up for herself and said, it's none of your business. I've created a successful restaurant and a successful family.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're not giving my male chefs any of those questions, so why are you giving it to me?
Right.
But none of the male chefs around her, I'm not saying stand up for women, we definitely don't need that, but none of the male chefs around her said, she's absolutely right.
Yeah, I hear you. And, come to think of it, it could have been and would have been nice if they had stood up for her too. And
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because not only did she have the responsibility to call the reporter or the folks in the audience out, but it also is interesting that the other folks on the panel didn't have any responsibility to even think it through. Like the discussion that we're having, it's so interesting because oftentimes it's on the folks who are at the end of these questions to handle it, navigate it, have the burden of the question, do the mental gymnastics, go through all the hoops. And it's interesting that the other half leaves themselves out of the conversation, that they have no responsibility, and on a bad day get to say these really demeaning remarks.
Yeah.
And I think the reality of that is so interesting to me. Have you seen this? Say, for example, after she stood up for yourself, have you seen discourse about this, like op-eds or any conversations that were being had? Do you see people recognizing this, or especially the new chefs coming up that you interact with, do you see them being aware of this, wanting to push for a different way?
I think yes, it's really difficult because I also think there's a certain type of attitude that's, you know, I was treated this way, so I want them to know how I felt.
Wow, yeah.
And you know, this isn't saying though like that I'm a saint. You know, I get angry. I have to sometimes like walk away from a situation because I'm about to like explode.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, I'm definitely not a saint, but I think that a lot of people do want to change, but you know, I remember so this is just an example of, you know, the people that are trying. I went to an event in Canberra for chefs, for like for mental health in chefs, because it is very bad. It is an issue. You know, a lot of chefs have killed themselves. A lot of chefs are depressed. A lot of chefs suffer from extreme anxiety. And it is a very stressful job. So no wonder. And I went to the event, and after this amazing speech and all this, you know, good stuff that came from it, at the end of it, someone raised their hand up and said, so how do you intend on changing the industry to help these chefs? And she goes, it's not the industry that needs to be changed. It's the industry we all love. It's the help that these chefs can get, which we need to make more accessible. And I was just kind of like, but don't you think, sure, make help more accessible. I think we need to do that in pretty much every aspect of life ever.
Right.
But shouldn't we be stopping something at the cause?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's systemic. Yeah, absolutely.
It's systemic. It's not, they just need access to help.
Yeah.
Well, what's causing them to have such high stress levels, you know, to feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we prevent that from happening before they have to go and seek professional help?
Yeah. And in drawing a lot of parallels to what you're sharing with my experiences in school, and then hearing stories of people who've since graduated are in these, or have been in these workplaces, especially during the pandemic, it's and even thinking about this podcast, it's not enough to have these quick tips, because you can't really quick tip your way out of these major systemic issues if the system itself is crushing you. And it's not about, for example, folks teaching people how to use their insurance to find a therapist. Even though that is really helpful, it's about understanding why and what is pushing them into seeking help, especially if it's not just out of them wanting to better themselves. If it's really stemming from these workplaces, which I hear you saying it is, and I hear so many of my peers, again, being crushed by these workspaces, being crushed by academia, and just these really interesting and old systems of, oh, we went through it the hard, shitty way, so you have to go through the hard, shitty way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how you make a strong person.
Right.
Which I think is just not true. Like, you know, the old fashioned way of being like, you scream at them, you yell at them, tough love. Like, that's how you make a strong person.
Yeah.
Which is just not true.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of takes me to like my next point of, I've been seeing on social media, me and my roommate had a joke about this, how everybody was saying, run away from your workplace when they say the words, we're like a family.
Yeah.
And I just found that so interesting, because I, you know, genuinely have thought of workplaces as family.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my mum even will say like, oh, but like you guys are family. And like, I think it's especially true in hospitality because, you know, we are together. Like I'll work a 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. shift. And then after that though, we all have dinner together.
Right.
We all talk about our personal lives. We're all very close. We all know everything about each other. We've all seen each other cry. We've all seen each other angry. We've all seen each other in every state. And I think that does make a family.
Yeah.
But then there's also this really interesting component of, yeah, but everybody's replaceable.
Which is not true in a family.
Which is not true in a family.
Yeah.
And see, this is what I find so frustrating because to me, no, everybody is not replaceable. And then, you know, I've had conversations about this with so many people and they'll go, yeah, but you've got to understand it from a business point of view or from this point of view or this point of view. But I'm like, okay, so in my mind, I'm owning my own business, whatever. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I really still don't think everybody is replaceable.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you know, if somebody walks out tomorrow, you can get a new chef who can do the job, but you don't have their personality.
Yeah.
You don't have the things they know about your other team members. You don't have the personal things they bring to a team. And I think that if you're such a family and you're so connected and personal and so on, then how is everybody replaceable?
Right.
And I just have a really massive issue with that. Because then I'm like, that in itself causes mental health issues. Like, oh, these people are my family, but I can be kicked out on the road in a day and never see them again. Like, that's stressful.
That is stressful. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'd love to jump into some of the rapid fire questions with you. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to know, what does wellness mean to you?
Wellness to me, I think wellness is very mental. I think when I think of wellness, I think of mental wellness. I think of taking a walk on a good day with fresh air on your own, listening to a good podcast. I think of exercising to release endorphins, to make yourself feel better. You know, having something that nourishes your body. But also, you know, wellness is hanging out with your best friends and cooking a meal for your family and having conversations that nourish you as well. I think that to me is wellness.
I love that. What does effective leadership mean to you?
Someone who can effective leadership. I think it's people who are able to command respect and to be respected in order to get the job done and get it done very well. But also are really capable of caring and have the ability to make you feel heard as an employee or as a person or as, you know, as anything. A leader who makes someone feel heard, not listened to.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a big difference. I think is effective leadership is to,
Tell me about your morning and or night routine and what helps you bounce back if you ever fall off a track.
My morning routine is, this is if I ever get up early enough, because I very much struggle to hear my alarm. Wake up, do Pilates, go home, have a shower, like do my full makeup, like not rushed, do my hair, have, you know, I like to have a light breakfast, so like maybe some granola and some milk, my coffee, and then get in like one episode of my favorite podcast, which is Meghan Markle's podcast at the moment. Oh
I
my
love that. Mm-hmm.
Get in at least one episode in the morning, because I
Mm-hmm.
love to start my day off with people who just like think the same, like just like I agree with, and
Mm-hmm.
who inspire me to like have a good day.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
night routine involves many serums,
Mm-hmm.
involves a long warm shower.
Mm-hmm.
I like to, if it's a hair washing day, I like to fully get in my hair, do a hair mask, do a face mask, scrub my body, like do the full thing, watch a movie while I'm waiting for it all to sink in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you get in bed with your tea and you feel so clean.
Yes.
Like my favorite night routine to do.
That sounds so lovely.
It's just like, oh my God, beautiful. And the thing that puts me back on track, which is actually good, because recently I did have about a month and a half, but I was off track.
Mm-hmm.
I was like so off track, it wasn't even funny. I was questioning whether I should quit cooking. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think is what got me back on track during that situation was the best advice I've ever gotten is like, just like be sad.
Yeah.
Just like be off track. Like when people get off track and get depressed about it and get anxious about it, it's like we do things to try and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my God, I've got to go to the gym to get rid of the anxious energy, or I feel so depressed, like I've got to go do something. And that's all great.
Mm-hmm.
But like, just like let yourself be sad.
Yeah.
And lay in bed for the day.
Yeah.
And let yourself be confused.
Mm-hmm.
And let the answers kind of come organically.
Yes.
And it's really hard to do, but I think, it's important that, if you're feeling depressed or, like you've run out of steam, you kind of have to rest.
Yeah. No, that's a big call.
Let it happen.
Absolutely. And I feel like that really applies to me right now, because I think in transitioning out of school, taking the break during the summer, but then transitioning into work and being excited, but then also with there being so many new things and just being so tired after school, I just don't think that the summer break was enough. It's like I just need longer to process everything, and that our body remembers, and that we're still sort of holding on to all of that weight, that like metaphorical weight, and that if it's heavy, you can just rest and you don't need to rush to a billion things to get it off your chest. It feels like this thing that I can't quite like get off, if that makes any sense, and that it's okay to just let it be heavy for a while, and that the change and the shifts will come organically when we are rested and when our cup is full.
Exactly. And I think as well, like, trying to throw band-aids onto a situation also just pushes it down, and it's like, okay, well then like later on it's just gonna come back up. And I feel like by you just being like, okay, I don't feel great at the moment, I'm having a really bad time, I'm not doing things right, I am angry all the time, I am sad all the time, I'm not the best version of myself. But like, who is all the time?
Right.
Like, give yourself a break. And just be like, all right, well, looks like I'm just not going to be the best version of myself a little bit.
and making peace with that and accepting that. And that is such a big message. I'd love to know if there was anything else that you'd like to share, anything that you felt like we didn't quite get to unpack, or you had any other additional thoughts on it.
I think No, you know what? I think we just had a pretty great conversation. I think that was awesome. I think in terms of like the mental health aspect, it's not just because you're a chef, you know, not all chefs experience bad mental health. You can experience bad mental health if you're in anywhere in life at any point, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just like a really important thing to know that it just absolutely, in every situation I've ever experienced,
Mm-hmm.
it does get better.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't get better straight away.
Yeah.
Or anywhere near straight away.
Yeah.
Like you could be 3 months into a depressive episode, you know, like I was so depressed for about, 2-3 months, and I was like, this is not going to end. Like I need to do something about it because it's not going to end.
Yeah.
But I was just like, and now I'm on the other side.
Mm.
And it's just kind of like, I understand why it happened and what I need to do to avoid it in the future. But if I can't avoid it, then you just sit with it.
Yeah.
I think sitting with things is the message to take away from this.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, how can the folks listening best continue learning from you and or reach you?
You can reach me on Instagram. That is the best form of communication,
Perfect.
I think. Because, I am on Instagram 100% of the time. And my Instagram name is SCHILIROS1.
Perfect. And I will link that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me and helping me make some really strong connections between your experience as a chef and just all through your experiences with Michelin Starred kitchens and all the incredible places that you've been at, with the STEM world that I'm in and the academia world that I just got out of. And I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation and to give people who are listening an opportunity to sort of see the similarities and differences between these spaces, and to realize that when you're the first or only in an industry, it doesn't sometimes matter what industry it is, it still feels the same. And that there's so much learning that we can have by sharing these stories across industries as well, across cultures. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to be able to share your story here. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I love talking to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming.